This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Make another smart choice with Auto Quote Explorer to compare rates from multiple car insurance companies all at once. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
A mochi moment from Mark, who writes, I just want to thank you for making GLP-1s affordable. What would have been over $1,000 a month is just $99 a month with Mochi. Money shouldn't be a barrier to healthy weight. 3 months in, and I have smaller jeans and a bigger wallet. You're the best. Thanks, Mark. I'm Myra Ahmed, founder of Mochi Health. To find your Mochi moment, visit joinmochi.com.
Mark is a Mochi member compensated for his story.
Welcome back to another episode of Investies. I'm your host, Linda Garcia, Texas State Representative and author of the book Wealth Warrior. This week on the podcast, we are continuing with our series as we reflect on the year and the most pivotal highlights that we had that drove the market. This is a great opportunity to reflect on how you felt when these transitions were happening in the market, how you dealt with your portfolio, and of course, what you learned. In last week's episode, we talked about the crazy heights that the stock market was reaching, and we also even discussed the potential of selling out of some positions to lock in some of our profits for those that have been invested in the market for some time. In this week's episode, we are going to talk about the critical decision that Donald Trump made to implement tariffs and how that impacted the stock market. We're also going to go into some historical events and reflect on tariffs overall. Before we get into this week's episode, I wanted to let you know that on Patreon in January of 2026, I am bringing back the Abundance Plan Reimagined. Since 2020, I have hosted what we call the Abundance Plan, which is a way to reflect emotionally on money and identify how we are currently experiencing money and how that is impacting not only our decisions about money, but how we are currently generating money and how our beliefs on money can be currently limiting us of generating more money. This has been an all-time fan favorite, and I am so excited to bring it back for January of 2026. If you want to join us for the Abundance Plan Reimagined, which is a program that lasts approximately 2 months, head over to patreon.com/investies and join us on the exchange tier. Enjoy this week's episode of Investies from February 7th of 2025. On Saturday evening, February 1st, Trump made a tariff threat against Mexico, Canada, and China. The threat was a 25% wholesale tariff on both Mexico and Canada at once. And then China was only being levied with a 10% tariff. The market, of course, is having a severely strong reaction to this. Here's the thing. We are not surprised that there were tariffs implemented. This is something that Trump campaigned on. I think that for the entirety of his campaign, a lot of the times we look at things he said as rhetoric with no action. That's not necessarily happening this time around, but also I think we were so focused on the tariff narrative that we hadn't really considered how the countries that we were going to implement tariffs on were going to respond. And so I think a lot of the fear that is currently being generated in the market is coming from other countries' response to Trump's tariffs. Last week on Friday, January 31st, the market was already having a negative reaction to the potential trade war. It took an entire leg down. This morning on Monday, we woke up to another leg down on the market. The Dow was down 1.15%. The S&P 500 dropped 1.5%, and the NASDAQ almost took a 2% drop just upon opening. It was down 1.9%. Also, for context, anytime I say a leg, it typically involves a percentage point or more. The individual stocks that are currently being impacted the most by this trade war is General Motors. It is down 3%, Ford down 5%, Tesla down 3%. Constellation Brands, which is a beverage company, is down 6%. Diageo, an alcoholic beverage company, is down 4%. Nike, down 2%. Lululemon, down 3%. Apple, down 2%. FedEx, down 2%. Constellation Energy, which is a carbon-free energy company, is down 2%. Toll Brothers, which is a home building company, is down 2%. Broadcom, which is a tech company, is down 4%. And Sunrun, which is a battery storage, mostly for residential, is down 4%. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I believe that what is taking us by surprise, and when I say us, what I mean is why the market is being taken by surprise, is because of how the countries are reacting to Trump's tariffs. We've talked about this multiple times. The stock market is always forward-looking. It will price in what it anticipates. And I think that what it is pricing in today is the reaction from other countries. Now, the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, took a very hard stance on how he was going to react to tariffs, announcing 25% against us in tariffs as well on $155 billion worth of U.S. goods. For the most part, it is very challenging to get economists to agree on how certain news cycles is going to affect the economy. However, we are seeing some consistency this morning from economists across the board. They are worried about our GDP growth in the United States of America. By the way, GDP growth is what determines whether or not we go into a recession. And 20% of our GDP growth comes from exports. So this is a concern, along with the fact that tariffs can also contribute to inflation on an already very vulnerable economy when it comes to inflation. The Prime Minister, in a press conference that was directed to America, said, like the American tariffs, our response will also be far-reaching and include everyday items such as American beer, wine, bourbon, fruits, and fruit juices, including orange juice, along with vegetables, perfume, clothing, and shoes. It'll include major consumer products like household appliances, furniture, and sports equipment, and materials like lumber and plastic, along with much, much more. Following that statement, Mexico also vowed retaliation. They did not list any specifics. President Claudia Sheinbaum just slammed Trump's tariffs and said that she will implement a plan B they have been working on, which includes tariff and non-tariff measures in defense of Mexico's interests. What the market does not like is uncertainty. It doesn't like clarity so that it can quantify the impacts on the market. And so it will drop drastically based on what it does not know. Now, I have also talked about this a lot in the past. When the stock market goes up rapidly, it is not building a level of support, and Issues like these that arise can drastically impact the market and erase all of the growth. China said that it would file a lawsuit with the World Trade Organization in response to the 10% duties, and it will take necessary countermeasures. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce said in a statement, the U.S.'s unilateral tariff hike seriously violates the World Trade Organization rules and does nothing to resolve its own issues and disrupts normal economic and trade cooperation between China and the U.S. There's a real-time update just in, as I mentioned in the start of this podcast. There's so much information coming out moment to moment that things are shifting quickly. It looks like President Trump and President Sheinbaum entered negotiations, and there will be a 1-month pause on tariffs. This has completely reversed what we erased in the market, with the markets shooting up. The S&P 500 increased 1.38% on this news. The Dow increased 1.32%, and the Nasdaq increased 1.49%. So it erased all of its losses that it had from this morning, and it is looking to try and fully recover. We will see how this news continues to unfold and impact the market. By the time you are listening to this episode, I anticipate that many more changes will have happened.
This episode is brought to you by Espolón Tequila. Slow, sticky, snoozy. They call these the dog days of summer. But Espolón? They don't do boring. Welcome to the Marg Days. Espolón Tequila. 100% blue Weber agave, born to shake up your summer. Just add lime, agave, and a little attitude. Visit espolontequila.com. Espolón Tequila, 40% alcohol, volume 80 proof. Copyright 2025, Campari America, New York, New York. Drink responsibly.
Hello, I'm Diane Morgan. If you know who I am, you know who I am. If you don't, who cares? I'm here to explain Italian Time, a holiday phenomenon where Italians throw away their clocks and gather for eternity with San Pellegrino. I've been at this party so long that I've eaten 5 courses, hugged someone's grandma twice, and been offered a job in the family restaurant. So this holiday season, make sure to bring enough San Pellegrino to last you through the meal, the after meal, and the entire goodbye ritual. San Pellegrino, holiday on Italian Time.
I think it's also worth noting that this is the second time we see Trump using tariffs as a tactic. He did it back in 2019, threatening with a 10% increase on China for tariffs. We watched him create a lot of uncertainty in the market, and so this isn't the first time. How common are trade wars? How often is this used as a tactic? Not very often at all, actually. I went back to look and see when trade wars have taken place in American history. The first one was with the Boston Tea Party. It included American colonists and the British Parliament. The Boston Tea Party led us to a Revolutionary War that began back in 1775. The next trade war took place during the Great Depression, known as the Smoot and Hawley Act of 1930. This is where President Herbert Hoover originally set out to deal with a farm crisis in the early years of the Great Depression and proposed tariffs on agriculture imports. Senators Reed Smoot and Willis Hawley then offered their own legislation, adding a slew of industrial tariffs. This was despite a petition by over 1,000 economists calling on the stop of this plan. The consequences for this led to a disaster. The United States was not able to swiftly recover from the Great Depression. We saw exports falling by 61% during that time. In the 1960s, there was a chicken tariff war that included the United States, France, and West Germany. We had a rise here in the United States of factory chicken farming, where America sold the cheapest poultry across the world. And Europe didn't like that, so they imposed tariffs on our chicken, and we responded with tariffs on Volkswagen buses, French brandy, potato starch, and dextrin. In 1987, there was a trade war that we had with Japan where President Ronald Reagan doubled the import prices on computers, power tools, and televisions coming in from Japan as an effort to stop the underpricing of American semiconductor computer chips. This sounds really familiar. The consequences for this were actually pretty mild, given that Japan chose not to strike back, hoping to prevent any issues causing severe damage to the world's free trading system. So the Japanese just basically decided to not retaliate in response to these tariffs. We have had a long-standing trade war with Canada known as the Lumber Wars. This makes perfect sense as to why the Prime Minister of Canada is responding with a heavy hand. In 1982, the United States argued that Canada was unfairly subsidizing its softwood lumber and has led to years of a standoff. We have seen lumber increase by 40% throughout the years. In 1993, we experienced a banana war, which included the United States, Europe, and Latin America. While we don't grow a lot of bananas in the United States, they are mostly grown in Latin America. Those farms are actually owned by American companies. The United States complained back in 1993 when Europe began imposing high tariffs on fruit coming out of Latin America. In retaliation, the United States placed tariffs on items like French handbags, British linens, and Danish hams. After Europe filed 8 complaints with the World Trade Organization, in 2009, they finally agreed to ease the tariffs, and in 2012, the banana war finally ended. That brings us to one of the last trade wars that we had prior to Trump. This last one was in 2002, known as the steel tariff. In efforts to boost the country's steel industry, President George W. Bush imposed tariffs of 8 to 30% on steel imports. The European Union quickly retaliated with tariffs on Florida oranges, American cars, and more. A complaint against the United States was filed with the World Trade Organization, which found the U.S. violation of tariff rate commitments. Bush ended the tariffs in 18 months, earlier than planned on a 3-year period. The consequences for this trade war actually varies. Some economists argue that we lost up to 26,000 jobs in steel-using industries, while other analysts say that steel jobs were added and that the industry saw a small uptick in profits. What do all of these trade wars have in common? I did notice that the majority of these trade wars did take place with a Republican president, with the exception of Lyndon B. Johnson. This is in reference to the chicken tariff war. However, it is important to note that in this case, LBJ did not start the trade war. The trade war began with France and West Germany, who put tariffs on the birds. Now that we're all much more well-versed on the history of trade wars, it can help us properly assess what's taking place and how it can potentially impact us, because trade wars do in fact have an impact, and we're feeling that already. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. I'm your host, Linda Garcia. A special thank you to the team. Wait, no, that's not how it goes. Investies is a Cosmic Standard and In Lose We Trust production. Now, a very special thank you to the team, Asia Simpson, Eliza Smith, and Jacob Winnick.
The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in more places that could expose you more to identity theft. But LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our US-based restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Don't face drained accounts, fraudulent loans, or financial losses alone. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.